Today, I'm going to take you through the 27-point SEO checklist that you should follow if you are creating content for a B2B business. Now, this does focus more specifically on Google's recent helpful content update. So I recently shared on my LinkedIn free access to a 27-point checklist that essentially reviews all the updated documentation that Google have provided us, alongside some primary research from what we've seen across our clients and competitors, as well as some secondary research as to what the SEO community is saying specifically about this update. Now, of course, we're a B2B performance marketing agency, so we're focusing more on B2B sites and B2B businesses ultimately. So I think the first thing to look at is when we have a read of the helpful content documentation, there's a couple of things to really pull out here. So the first thing is that it is a site-wide signal. So what this will essentially mean is that if you have pages that are considered unhelpful across the entirety of the site, then actually this could impact the rankings of your homepage, your feature pages, any pages that are relying on generating leads into the business. So we're not in a position where we can just neglect bad content, unloved content, because it could actually have real impact on the website's ability to generate prospects for the sales team. So that's the first thing here. The second thing is that Google actually outlined that removing unhelpful content could actually help rankings of other content. So this could inadvertently mean that if you've got hundreds and hundreds of articles that have been there for years that serve no purpose, that maybe aren't relevant to the business in any way, and maybe we're just put there because we were told that in the past having more content is just a good thing, potentially no indexing this content, outright removing this content could actually work in your favor. Now, I know we'd seen tests over the years to indicate that this could potentially be the case, but to actually have this written down is quite a big step. So if we've got loads of content that is totally not relevant to the business in any way, then it's very likely removing it will present a net positive outcome for the site as a whole. Now, the third thing I thought was quite interesting here is that the documentation talks about a classifier using a machine learning model. So what this will essentially mean is that Google very likely, just as it has with crawl capacity and everything that sort of goes into that, is that it will not crawl and render pages indefinitely. It will very likely have a token limit and therefore a set number of words that it will actually crawl. So what this again indicates is that for the content to be considered as helpful, we need to provide the useful content, the important content, and the trust signals to validate that content as high up the page as possible. And we've gone through numerous tests to indicate that the average as to what content should look like should follow a system such as this. So if I jump back into the checklist, and as I said, we've gone through the documentation, we've run our own tests across client sites, across competitor sites, and we've also had a look at insight into what the community is saying on other tests that they've been run. A lot of this here won't be necessarily new ground or anything super sort of fresh to the industry. What I've done is there's sort of three key points that I want to focus in on more specifically that we've seen as having the biggest impact whilst this update has been rolled out across September in particular. So I'm going to show 3 pages that I believe have done this quite well. And the 3 points we're looking at in particular is ensuring that the content is written by experts or knowledgeable individuals, ensuring that author credentials are clear and obvious, and as I've just mentioned, prioritizing the helpful content and the people first content. So Google also in their documentation talk about it being people first, adding an opinion, talking as the author, and adding a little bit of insight that, may not necessarily be known or common ground. And quite a few of these link off, right? So, we want to make sure that their content is original. We're not copying it. We're not just sort of rehashing essentially what is available. We're adding original thought and insight to these pieces, which if you're an expert on a particular subject, this should come quite naturally anyway. So one of the first pieces I want to have a look at is LogRocket here. Now, exploring use cases for TypeScript tuples, I think that is. Now, this I would say is probably quite a common representation of what you come across. But this is what we see above the fold, right? So we've got an author bio here. We've got a small bio, to follow the author name. And whether the site meant this or not, they do inadvertently sort of answer the question quite early on into providing a sort of use case for a TypeScript tuple, I think it is. So due to the nature of TypeScript, these element types, also known as the point of initialization, with tuples, we can define the data type that can be stored in every position in any way. So already it starts providing a bit of value to the user without having to jump down the content. Now, again, this is far more of a common practice now, but also having a contents that can jump to the specific part, again, that's going to be helpful to the user. If we remove the SEO hat, take a step back, providing anchors to relevant sections is obviously going to be super useful. So having this is really positive. I think what's interesting, again, is if I click onto the author, you might not notice it straight away, but we've also got links out to the Twitter page here. Which I thought was also quite interesting as well. So we want to try and validate the expertise, or at least validate that this person is a real person, and providing links to a Twitter account can at least make a step in the right direction. Now, again, if we benchmark this against competition and competition aren't providing this helpful content, then of course LogRocket will essentially see a net gain from this update. Of course, we have to take in mind that this is one signal against many other signals, and so other signals may override this, such as authority, and essentially external links back into the site. But this page, only recently went out in July, albeit it is relatively high at DI site, so there's an argument to say that it might just rank quite quickly anyway. But definitely over the September and actually into the October 23 core and spam update that we're currently going through now, it's had a positive impact, which is really good. So I do think that although these signals probably aren't the sole signals that have contributed to that ranking, having the author, the credentials, and in a roundabout way answering the question relatively high up, and then providing nice anchor links to other parts of the page would have worked in its favor. So here's another domain that's actually held pretty well on the whole across the helpful content update. And again, whilst we go through the core and spam updates. So what I'm trying to look at more specifically is the response from the September helpful content update. I know the core update has added some corrections, but we are still going through the process of that update being rolled out, so that hasn't quite concluded yet. So one of the pages here, and that they're essentially a bit of a review site anyway, the 40 best HR software of 2023. Now this is there above the fold. So what you'll notice is, again, we've got a relatively thin menu at the top that doesn't take up too much of the user page. Straight away, there's a number of things you'll notice here. So firstly, we've got a link to an author. We've obviously got the published date here as well. We've got a small bio that presents, it just says, or at least gives an indication that they're using their HR experience, which would of course be relevant from an HR software perspective. And then they've given their top 10. They've also given an editorial policy down here, and they've also been very upfront with the fact that they earn a commission through the links. And the fascinating thing is that we know as fact that this business operates strictly as a pay-to-play. So Google is seemingly happy for them to have affiliate links. We've got 5 affiliate links that sit above the fold, but they're very confident that the content they're providing and the trust signal, the credentials of the person providing this content is strong enough that they're still going to reward it, which again is quite fascinating. Now, if I go into the author bio, we've got a little bit more of a bio from the sort of sentence we've got on the preceding page. And we've also got a link to their LinkedIn as well, which further gives validation of their experience as well. Now, of course, Google will have certain limits on how far and to what extent they will crawl the external sources. But we can certainly see that they're going deeper into the jungle to ensure that credibility is established and the person creating content on a particular category is, or at least has, some form of expertise within that. Now, of course, the more competitive the category is, or any categories that are directly related to the YMYL, will likely have more resource put to them to validate those credentials. Whereas, a category that potentially is in a niche of sports, for example, if we were to look at a football, review of football boots or baseball bats or something like that, lower competition, non-YMYL sites, likely not as much resource will put forward into validating the credentials of the authors that are creating that content, basically. So again, having this as part of your template where we have a clickable author, obviously we've got the published date. I think that's quite common now, at least an updated date, a bit of a bio, an editorial policy, and then essentially trying to answer the question as best we can above the fold, or at least giving as much insight as we can that helps the user above the fold, is only going to be seen as helpful, as long as that query does answer the question, and again, isn't just kind of for the fluff or used, for the purpose of just linking out to an external site, or for example. So this is the page here, and it's operating in the highly competitive sort of HR software category. They're sitting at number 3 in the US, an incredibly competitive keyword. If I jump into it in Ahrefs, okay, KD's 54. It's not as competitive as possibly it will be in the UK, where it's a KD 71, but we can still see it ranking at number 3 as well. So it's performing well across both the US and the UK. Now, the final site I want to also show that follows a similar sort of theme is JustWorks. So by this point, you'll get a sense of the patterns that are seemingly at play here. So again, above the fold, obviously we've got the title here. We've got the author. Now, when I hover over it, a light box appears. It gives me the bio, actually gives me the number of posts and a link to this as well. Interestingly, in the header, it gives me direct access to their Twitter, their LinkedIn, and this here, I guess, is probably just a shareable icon, which again, I think is pretty cool. And one thing that we've also tended to notice is that anything with a bit more of a unique theme across the site, that isn't something that is just sort of out the box, that is seen almost worldwide, they tend to be favored to some degree. So how much of a strength that signal is, it can probably be argued one way or another. But typically a custom theme that works in favor of the user, anecdotally seems to have been rewarded pretty well during this update as well. So when we have a look at the content, they've got a nice table of contents on the left-hand side here, which, just like the last site, gives us access to jump straight down to the relevant section, which again isn't necessarily an out-of-the-box sort of new idea to test, but again, it can be regarded as providing helpful content to the user as well. If I go back up to the top, what's the difference between HMO, PPO, POS, EPO? we're quickly sort of defined. We're sort of given a nice sort of table here to sort of say which is which and which is not. So I think they go some way to essentially try and answer that query as early as possible, make sure that understanding of the different phrases are categorized as well. And as we go through this as well, if we're looking for sort of depth and expertise, we can see that they link out to sort of nice, relevant articles. The article length, you'll also notice, isn't that long as well. And again, they're seemingly, again, slightly anecdotally, seems to have been a bit of a shift in respect of to shortening down articles, removing fluff or unnecessary content that doesn't really add much to the site, but was being there to sort of bloat out the word count. These sort of sites are being rewarded. And I think that's great because it encourages just good writing. It encourages writing that gets to the point, and essentially eliminates the need for unnecessary bloated content for content's sake, basically. Another thing as well, the typography is really nice. There's lots of nice headings in here. A nice sort of opt-in. We've still got the author bar on the right-hand side, which I think is a really good touch as well, with a reading time there. And it's not overly taxing as well, which is fantastic. So I think you would look at this page, it's a very, very nice page. It seems to tick all the boxes correctly. And as a result, we have seen, it had a little bit of a decline over the last few days, but on the whole, if we look at it across a 6 or even 12-month period, there's been a nice sort of medium growth in the organic traffic back to the site. And I would only expect that to continue based on the content. The only way we might see it drop down is if we see other competitors enter that market, either match or do something better from a content perspective, then we might see Just Works displaced for that reason. But a really nice piece of content and a really nice template to roll out. So that sort of summarizes it as well. As I said, I'll add this checklist into the description of the video so you can have access to it. But these are sort of the key things that I've noticed moving the needle for B2B content sites. So ensuring the content is as high up as possible. We answer the question as quickly as possible. We provide a nice author bio with credentials. We provide that above the fold. So providing as many trust signals above the fold as possible. Providing, if we've got editorial policies, that's fantastic. Assuming again that the content adds sort of depth and expertise. That's largely it. I'll put this 27-point checklist into the description of some kind below the video. And I think it's useful to use this in accordance with, an SEO steer. So the traditional SEO best practices still apply. It's always good to write keywords with keyword entities in mind, which a lot of the SEO software can provide to ensure that a writer is writing about the right things, and we can give it a better opportunity to rank for more keywords, but also giving them freedom to add opinions, expertise on a subject, and to go really deep instead of narrow will be the content that ultimately compounds and wins over the 12, 24, 36 plus month period. So I think a few key things here: ensure the trust signals are above the fold. Ensure we establish the credibility above the fold. Ensure we try and answer the question or give at least a key takeaway, a summary, something that if a user just wants to capture the answer to the question in a short period of time, they're able to do that. But as you go through the content as well, just make sure that it's succinct. Ensure that you break it up with imagery, creativity, nice headings, bullet points that allow you to get your point across in an effective way, and encourage that user, if they do want to know the depth, then give them the depth. If you need to link out to other articles, then of course link out to those other articles. Provide as much value, and as many resources as you feel that content needs. Just don't provide it unnecessarily, basically. So thank you for your time. Thank you for watching. If you've got to the end here, please like and subscribe, and also feel free to drop in any comments of anything that you've noticed